All righty. Welcome everybody to the engineering panel. We have Martin, Lavonca, and Beth here. Open up the floor to any questions. If not, I have some questions.
Jaylen, maybe we can start with just each introducing ourselves.
Yeah, go ahead, Beth. Go ahead. I saw you, Beth.
Okay, I'll start then. So, hi everybody, my name is Beth Carter. I am a chemical engineer. I have a bachelor's of science degree in chemical engineering from Northwestern. I graduated from college 12 years ago now, and I've actually been working for the same company the whole time. I work for a company called UOP. I'm based in Des Plaines, which is a northwestern suburb of Chicago, pretty close to the airport. And UOP is a part of Honeywell, which is a company that you may know because it's a very large industrial conglomerate, and very likely the thermostat that's in your house or in your that you see in buildings is supplied by Honeywell. That's often the association that people have. But the part of Honeywell that I work for called UOP provides process technology and catalysts to the energy industry. So in my job as a chemical engineer, I do research and development and commercialize technologies for the energy industry.
Okay, thank you, Beth. Go ahead, Martin.
Okay, I'm Marty Gonzalez. I work for BP, and I've worked for BP, starting with Amoco for about 25 years. We recently restructured, so I'm under an organization called Innovation and Engineering, and within that, Digital Production and Business Services, and within that, there's a group called Intelligent Operations. So Intelligent Ops does, we'll get into a little bit of this later. I know there are questions about what exactly we do, but we're a digital solution group. So we pair up use cases, what we call use cases in the field, so things that real people are trying to do with new technology that's being developed or has been adopted in another industry, and we try to incorporate that and make solutions. So I guess I'll just leave it there for now. Really great to be with everybody.
Actually, I think we're still backstage.
Okay.
I think we're still backstage for the main stage.
Okay.
I'm gonna see.
So we need to get front center.
No, we're live, everyone. You guys can keep going.
Okay. All right, Lavonca, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. Yes, so my name is Lavonca Davis. I am a relatively newer engineer. I just graduated from Carnegie Mellon University last May with a major in chemical engineering and a minor in computer science. I then started working for BP as well as Martin. I started in August of last year. I started off supporting Whiting Refinery, so kind of right outside the Chicagoland area, as a process and process safety engineer. So at the refinery, of course, that's where we take the crude oil and we convert it into the sellable products that you can then go pump at the gas station and things like that. I initially started supporting hydrotreating, which is kind of just cleaning up the product, getting rid of some of those nasty components that you wouldn't want in your car. And then we, like as Martin stated, we currently went through a huge reorg. And post the reorganization, I have continued to support process and process safety, but now on what we call the upstream side of things, so the production side. So the platform that I'm supporting will eventually be in the Gulf of Mexico. It's a new platform. We're still building it, which is really exciting. But it'll be in the middle, like in the Gulf of Mexico, and that's where we'll pull oil out of like the bottom of the ocean. And I also support general process safety. So that's looking at risk, looking at consequences, looking at potential bad things that could happen and try to mitigate and make things safer for the people who are working in these facilities. And I'm excited to talk about engineering as always. So please ask us some questions.
So I'm looking, we don't have any questions yet. Well, I guess I introduce myself as well. I'm moderating. I'm Jaylen. I also graduated chemical engineering from IIT in 2016. I'm operations manager at a food plant. So no oil refinery at all. I feed you, I don't let you go. And so great to have everyone here. So since we don't have any questions, I'll start. What's the hardest thing about chemical engineering? Go ahead, Martin. I'll let you go first.
What's the hardest thing about chemical engineering is probably there's so much to learn. I was picking up on some of the themes that Dr. Corson talked about. It's in the last session. It's really broad. So you have to be really good at learning to learn. You have to be resourceful and know how to pick up information that you don't know already. You have to establish a really wide network of people who can help you, because you can't possibly know everything yourself. So you shouldn't really try, and really don't be afraid of asking questions, because there's always people who are willing to help you. So it's kind of a strength. And we talk about like failing fast in the digital industry. That's totally cool. We're all here to help each other, and it's impossible to keep on top of everything in chemi. So that's probably the toughest thing. It's so broad and covers so many areas.
You have anything to add, Beth?
So me, the hardest thing about chemical engineering is a little bit different. So when I originally picked chemical engineering as a major, it was because in high school, I really hated English. I hated writing, I hated reading. It was the technical subjects that I was good at. I was good at math, I was good at science, I was good at physics. And I wanted to get away from writing. And I thought if I picked engineering, when I went to college, I wouldn't have to do a lot of writing. But I actually find as a chemical engineer, I spend a lot of my time writing and communicating with people in other ways. So I actually think that's the most challenging part of being an engineer is, being clear in my communications, in emails, in reports that I write, in presentations that I give, in groups that I talk to. Communication is actually probably the most important part of the job, which is something I wasn't expecting in chemical engineering.
Lavonca, do you have anything to add? I can concur. Writing, so.
I definitely agree with that as well. But I would say for me, the most challenging part, but also kind of the most exciting part, is that once you leave school and once you're out actually functioning as an engineer in general, but specifically a chemical engineer, the questions that are given to you or the problems that you have to solve no longer have definitive answers. And so like in school, if your professor sends you, okay, here's question 1, your professor knows the answer. So there is an answer, there's a solution, but that's not the case in the real world. Sometimes there's not a straightforward answer, or there are multiple answers, and you have to make sure that you're finding the best solution to the problem. So it's like the scope is so large and so grand, so it can be a little daunting sometimes, because you really have to make sure you're covering all your bases and exploring every avenue, and sometimes you don't even know where to start. But that's also the exciting part. It's kind of like every day is a challenge, and every day is like a little hunt for the answer, like a little mystery. So
good answer. I like that.
Thank you.
We have a question. Hey, for Marty, what high school did you attend?
I'm so glad you asked. I came out of the Chicago public school system. I went to Whitney Young.
Nice. And then who was the first engineer you met?
I only knew one engineer before I decided to become one, and that was my brother Nelson. I actually didn't know anything, and he had just started when I had made the choice. When I came into my junior year, he had just graduated University of Illinois. He was an electrical engineer, and I was really into chemistry. So I said, well, I like the engineering stuff. It looks like it makes good money. I'm good at math, right? I'm not gonna lie, but I love chemistry, right? So I kind of merged those things together. But I only halfway knew what I was getting into. I'm glad it worked out. And again, follow your interests, follow what you really like. And I think you're going to be okay. But yeah, first one I ever met who only had like a few months of experience, my brother.
I'm gonna pass that question on to Ivanka and Beth as well. Ivanka first.
So I'm not from the Chicago area. I am originally from right outside Columbus, Ohio. So I went to this really, really tiny suburban school called Pickerington High School. yeah, it was like right across the street from Bench Cornfield, so kind of the middle of nowhere. And then the first engineer I met, it's an interesting question. I would say I could technically say my dad. He likes to call himself a network engineer. He's in IT. But honestly, the first chemical engineer I met was my first professor in college. I didn't really know what chemical engineering was. Like Beth, I liked math, I like science. I didn't as much like the other stuff. And I was like, let's just put that together. I really like chemistry. So I was like, hey, chemical engineering, let's go. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out. And yeah, so I didn't really know what I was doing until, sometimes I know what I'm doing, but I didn't know what a chemical engineer did until I took that first class. My first professor explained it to us.
Beth?
Same high school question?
Same question. Like, what high school did you go to, and who's like the first engineer you met?
Yeah, so I moved around a lot when I was growing up, but I did go to high school in the Chicago area. I went to Naperville North High School in the western suburbs. So go Huskies if there's anybody from Naperville on the line. The first engineer I met, so my grandfather is an electrical engineer. So I guess he's probably the first engineer that I met, but his career was in sales. So it was actually, I was probably late in high school before I really knew that he was an engineer. I just thought he was a salesman. He was selling motors. So I guess that's how he got into that, because he's an electrical engineer. But the first chemical engineer I met, I think also was in college, a college professor.
Thank you all. Thank you, Joseph, for that question. You have another question. How can someone find a mentor to guide them? Beth, do you have any idea how someone can find a mentor?
Yeah, so I think there's lots of options. For example, attending events like this is a good way to find a mentor. This is your opportunity to meet some practicing engineers. And myself, and I'm sure others on the panel, would be very happy to talk with any of you about your career plans, or, things that we could, provide some advice or thoughts on. For me, as I've, went through college and have progressed in my career, I've always looked for people who I consider role models, people who have jobs that I would like to have someday, or people who have skills that I think are really impressive. And I try to get to know them. And it doesn't have to start with, hi, I'm Beth, can you be my mentor? But it starts with a conversation, introduce yourself, get to know people. And things can evolve into a mentor-mentee relationship.
Thanks, Ashar. I think I said that right. We have one from Keaton. Around when did you decide you wanted to become an engineer? Lavonca, how about you take this one?
Somewhere between my junior year and my senior year of high school, when the conversation started to come around, what do I want to do after graduation? Interesting story. I did think my initial plan was to become a lawyer. I wanted to be a sports agent or a corporate lawyer. And so my dad said, well, a lot of good lawyers are engineers, and they go to school for engineering first and they go to law school. And I had an uncle who he then explained to me had kind of done that similar process, which I didn't know. But so that was the initial goal. And then I got to school and I was like, I don't know about this law school and reading political books and policy. So we're just going to stick to engineering. But yeah, so it was like, that was around the time where my dad had a lot of influence and was like, you should do this. And I was like, okay.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Keaton. We have a question from Sabrina. What advice that you guys would give to someone who is not sure about what field of engineering they want to pursue? Tell you right now, we're all chemical engineers. We're going to say chemical engineering. Other engineers don't matter. But I'll let someone else answer. Get that to Martin.
Well, you're really lucky to have the internet these days, where you can research things, you can reach out to people virtually. So really, just learn and follow your interests. Really, I think that goes true for anything. There's so many resources online from different universities. You have to be aware that also, as you pick a school, that all schools teach a little bit differently. and it's worthwhile to look at the curriculums, you know, whatever engineering thing you're interested in. Go in and just be inquisitive and try to learn about it as much as possible. And then the networking thing that we talked about before, if you want to participate in events like AIChE or ASME or some of the other professional engineering organizations, those are great places to learn as well.
And can I add to that it's okay not to know what type of engineering you want to do. A lot of colleges, when you're applying, will ask you to list a major, and you can just pick something. But once you start college, it's actually a lot easier to learn about what all of the different types of engineering are, because you'll have access to people. You'll have access to other students, to professors, to events, to professional societies. And so it's okay to not know, and you can switch once you're in college.
That's a good point.
Lavonca, you want to add anything?
Beth said exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah, I was, like I said, I'm chemical engineering for life. I don't support the other ones. I tell everybody, it's just chemical. It's the best one. You do anything. All righty. Thank you, Sabrina. Adriana asked us, what activities or educational sources did you use while in high school to improve your knowledge in chemical engineering? That's a good question. So, such as any internships or any events that help us decide, that guided our decisions. Lavonca, I think you graduated college most recent, so you probably knew high school really better than the rest of us.
Yes, I did. I would say, yeah, in high school, I didn't really, again, like I said, I kind of just like chemistry, engineering, okay, sure, whatever. And the interesting thing is everyone always said, like, you know, chemical engineering is not just straight chemistry, right? And I was like, well, I guess we'll cross that bridge when we get there. And I still ended up liking it, so it's fine. But once you get to school, your opportunities definitely to explore your engineering field expand a lot. And like Beth said, and Martin said, like joining organizations at your school. I know my school had a program where you, instead of going home for like our fall break, you could go visit some of the engineering facilities in the area, and they would like expose you to what kind of work they do. But then also you have internships, and I did internships like every summer when I was in college. And those are honestly the best way to really figure out what an engineer does, because in school you're learning a lot of the theory, you're learning a lot of the high level stuff for understanding, but you don't always get the best grasp of this is what I would do if I were sitting at my desk like for the day as an engineer. So yeah, I would say internships or shadowing programs are also a good way to get that exposure.
If I can add something, if you are in the Chicago area, I mean, this is the Midwest region, right? So there are some of the programs, there's are things that go on at Argonne, for example, if you're near there, summer programs. Even way back when I was in high school, I participated in something there. There was also something at UIC. Back then it was called Saturday College, but these universities will a lot of times have outreach programs that are intended to help high school kids learn about different professions, sometimes go deep into some, sometimes give you a sampling. So, you know, look around, apply, get your parents to drive you there. You know, it's all good. You should feel free to explore.
Beth, do you have anything to add? I know you're a Husky out there in the western suburbs.
Yeah, I would say I didn't do anything specific in terms of learning about chemical engineering before I picked it as a major. Very similar to Lavonca. I liked chemistry and I decided chemical engineering. Actually, even more similar, when I started as a chemical engineer in college, I actually was pre-med. I wanted to be a doctor. And I picked chemical engineering because people said that would be a good undergraduate major to prepare you to be a doctor. My school didn't have a specific pre-med major. You had to pick something else, either chemistry or chemical engineering or biology or biological engineering. You know, one of those things that was consistent with med school, but not actually specifically pre-med. And for me, it wasn't until I had an internship the summer after my freshman year of college that I really understood what chemical engineering was. And I had such a good time at that internship. And, you know, I got to actually work as a practicing engineer, developing new process technologies in the energy industry. And I was like, wow, I can actually have a bigger impact on the world doing this than I could being a doctor. So I changed my mind and I decided to be a chemical engineer rather than being a doctor. So for me, I had that revelation, really understanding what chemical engineering is after I got to college.
I know that one thing I do know is that their thing is Engineering Day. They hosted a Rice College. What they did back when I was in college were a bunch of all different type of engineering profession societies go and showcase their different engineering things. So things in the community before COVID were more out there where you go and see people in real life. But I know they had Engineering Day. That was a big thing in Chicago. Thank you. Okay, another question, Adriana. What classes did you take in high school that still have an impact on your job today? Like what type of math or science classes? Martin, you want to take this from Mr. Whitney Young?
Yeah, so obviously, you know, calculus and chemistry, you know, especially AP Chem, AP Calc. The writing stuff, and I actually like to write. Maybe I'm kind of an oddball as far as being a Chem-E, but I still think a lot about the things that I learned back then, and some of the materials that they would give us to, you know, the lab experiments. Sort of the early learning, I think is really important. But I imagine most people would say the same thing. It's about math, and if you like math, you're going to dive right into that. If you like chemistry, you're going to really like that as well.
Ivanka or Beth, do you have anybody have anything else to add? Any classes that stuck out to help them in their careers today?
I mean, yeah, of course it's math and science. This might be an unpopular opinion, but honestly, I feel like the intro or like the initial class you take in high school are really important. They're very fundamental. Like I remember taking calculus when I got older and taking calculus in school. And honestly, I can't tell you the last time I did an integral, but I can tell you the last time I had to add a bunch of things or multiply a bunch of things, you know, and that's like your basic algebra and rules of algebra and stuff like that. So don't take for granted those early classes that you're taking because they are very important and they're also embedded in everything else you do when you do learn the harder stuff.
Beth, anything to add?
Yeah, I agree. I was going to say algebra is the one class that I use every day. I don't think a day goes by where I don't use what I learned in Algebra 1. It's a fundamental part of chemical engineering that we all use every day. I would say really all of the math classes. I occasionally do use calculus in my day job. I actually kind of like it when I get to do an integral at work. It feels like really exciting. So I do sometimes use that, but I definitely use the earlier math all the time, every day.
I'll tell you one thing specifically, if I can chime in again, that I still think about when I learned in high school. We learned about eggs, right? And how the little protein chains link together when you heat them up. And there was, I remember we had like a magazine and it told you like how to make the perfect egg and start with cold water and, you know, how to get the hydrogen sulfide out. And I just thought that was completely fascinating, right? So take advantage of the practical things that you see around your life. Ask a lot of questions and say, okay, how does that work? When you finally do get into college and you have to relate to all these different concepts, it helps if somebody has sort of explained some of the simple things that you see around you.
And I'm going to disagree a little bit with everyone. I would say your English classes and your communication classes are the most helpful in the workplace.
I'll go along with that.
How you communicate is, for me, because I kind of left engineering and I became in operations now. And I became a manager of people, and managers they're not good at reading. So quick and concise communication.
Pictures, take an art class, right?
Pictures, yes, even better. 1,000 words. Thank you, Adriana. Let's see. From Chloe, how have you prepared for interviews? Let's see. Beth, any insight?
I think that's a good question. So, you know, there's a couple of different types of interviews. There are interviews when you're applying for colleges, and there's interviews when you're applying for jobs. So it depends a little bit on the type of interview that you are preparing for. But I would say the way I prepare is I think about what is it that the interviewer wants to hear and try to prepare myself to tell those stories. And in terms of what does the interviewer want to hear, if you're applying to a college, they're going to want to know, why do you want to go to that college and that college specifically? So do some research about it and don't just say general things, but I want to go to this college because it's the right size for me. I've researched this particular program and I'm really interested in it. This is the place I want to live. You know, have a story about why you want to go to that college. Or similarly, if you're applying for a job, why do you want that job? How is it going to help you grow? Why would you be good at it? So, be specific about why you want it. And then I would say, think about what else the interviewer wants to know. What are they going to be looking for? They're going to be looking for leadership skills, ambition, your ability to work on teams, those kinds of things. And think about, I would say have 4 or 5 stories that you want to tell about yourself that reflect well on you. Times when you've worked on teams and, helped somebody that was not pulling their weight, or, times when you failed at something and had to figure out how to get better at it. Have 4 or 5 stories that reflect on you really well, and then you can be prepared for no matter what the questions are, because questions in interviews are often really general. And if you have 4 or 5 stories, you can just go through them and really answer any question with the same stories.
Martin, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think Beth is right on in terms of having your stories ready, and remember to have sort of a beginning, a middle, and an end. So you never want to leave them sort of halfway. You want to take it all the way through the end. And I'll sort of give away, when I interview people for a job, if you've got anything in terms of how you've helped somebody else, again, like Beth said, that's very powerful. And if you have an example of something that you put in place that sticks around forever or for a long time, like if you start up a club and you can say, it's been 5 years and they still run that club that I started, right? That stuff really, really goes pretty far.
Lavonca, anything to add?
Yeah, I think Beth and Martin hit it on the head. Just take that time beforehand and reflect on your life and why are you at this interview, and that's a good telling for why kind of some of your answers. Another tip that I really like, I guess I learned this more being in the technical atmosphere with my minor in computer science. But I know it's really popular in technical interviews, and I kind of just carry this over into all my interviews. You want to, when you're thinking, sometimes speak as you're thinking, say what you're thinking, especially if it is a technical interview, because even if you might not hit the answer directly on the head for what the interviewer is looking for, sometimes you can talk your way into it, or they really just want to see the way you think about problems and the way you go about solving them. And so I know, and I haven't had too many technical interviews. I mainly do personal interviews, which I love because you just be yourself, just be honest, be genuine. But in a couple of my technical interviews, I know sometimes I'm I don't really know what the answer is, but I'm just going to tell you what I'm thinking about. And sometimes they're yeah, that's about the answer. Yeah, good job. And it's okay, cool.
Thank you, Chloe. We have another question from Cameron. How much do student organizations help you throughout college and beyond? How about professional societies? So those 2 separate things in a way. So Beth, were you a part of any student orgs while you were in college or high school?
Yeah, both, and I still am. I would say that's actually been a theme of my life, kind of in high school and in college, and as I've been a working professional. There's kind of 3 broad areas of student organizations that I've been involved in. One is community service. So I was active in it in high school and in college, and now it's mostly in STEM outreach, actually. So talking with elementary school students and middle school students and high school students about careers in science and engineering, because I love it so much, and we need more people to join these industries as we, need to solve the world's problems. So that's what I do now. But, in high school and college, I did, different types of community outreach. I've also played soccer my whole life. So I played in middle school and high school, and also in college, intramural. And I still do now. We after work play soccer, not during COVID, which I really miss, but in general, I play soccer. And then the third thing is professional organizations that I started getting involved with in college and still involved in today. And I think they've been really helpful in helping me learn how to be a leader. I did, organizing community service events is very similar to being a project manager at work, where there's a whole bunch of people and something that you need to accomplish. You have a whole bunch of tasks. You try to get people excited about helping you with tasks. The skills that you learn through student organizations are exactly what you need to be effective at work. And so I would say they've been really helpful, not just in terms of making good connections, but also teaching me how to be a leader.
Lavonca, anything to add? Any student orgs you were a part of or anything?
I was definitely involved in student orgs. Like Beth said, it's good for those soft skills. Like you're in class all day to learn the technical stuff, but being in student orgs, you get to learn the personal stuff and interacting with people and leading people, planning events, things that they don't necessarily teach you directly in class. But also, I think student orgs are a great outlet to get away from some of your schoolwork. I know at my school, there were times where schoolwork would get really stressful. And so it was nice to have a group of people that I can interact with and engage with to kind of de-stress and calm down and have fun. The student org I was most involved in probably was NSBE, the National Society of Black Engineers. And I spent like all my time dedicated to NSBE. But it kind of helped me develop my passion for STEM outreach, especially to minority communities, because they're, like Beth said, there are not enough people in this career, and there are definitely not enough minorities in this career. And so I love NSBE, and knowing that that's my passion, like once I started working at BP, that was kind of the first thing I was reaching out for. I was like, okay, let me join our business resource group without the African American network. And then let me see what outreach they're doing. Let me get myself involved in that, because I knew that's like how I like to spend my time. And I didn't want to stop that just because I had graduated.
That sounds great. Martin, what about you? Any student org?
Yeah, so Beth and Lavonca, I think hit on exactly the right things, especially the business resource groups, or I was a part of SHIP, Hispanic Professional Engineers. Also, pursue the things that are sort of outside your comfort zone, outside of the technical world as well, which I think both Lavonca and Beth hit on. So I ended up with one of the organizations, was Mexican American Student Organization. I ended up starting up like a literary magazine, and I used to coordinate events like they've referred to. I got to start up or reinitiate the student government after the one they had dissolved. And it's like, I never got into politics, never really thought I'd be doing something like that, but we did, like electronic voting and that kind of stuff, so you get these experiences from going outside of your major, from interacting with other people that have common interests outside of your normal interactions that you do if you just went to class.
Yeah, it's amazing. It reminds me of a story like so for me only, I mainly focus with AIChE as a student org when I was a student. And one thing we started was pieing our professors in the face. And that was our way of giving back. And we raised a lot of money. It was really fun. I know Don's on here somewhere. We made a lot of money pieing Don in the face. Chmielewski, that was a lot of fun.
Let me know next time you do that. I'd love to pay for Don to get pie in the face.
Oh, if I go back to college, I'll make sure they still do it. I wonder if they still do that event. They did it 2-3 years in a row. I don't know if they still do it though.
All right, you gotta let us know, Don.
All righty. Thank you, Cameron. That was a good question. And the next one is, I hope I don't mess up your name, Shanita. Shanita asks, what are some of the biggest challenges you face when pursuing your degree or in general, and how did you overcome them? Let's go, Lavonca. You want to start us off? Some biggest challenges you faced and how you overcame them?
Yeah, sure. So, okay, biggest challenge, I would say there were certain times throughout my college career where my course load and just my life load was a lot heavier than other times. For example, my worst semester, I was taking all STEM courses. So I was taking like 2 math courses, 2 science courses, maybe 3 science courses, something like that. So it was really heavy workload. And then I also played sports in school. I was on the golf team at Carnegie Mellon. And on the golf team, you travel every weekend. You miss at least a day of classes every week because your tournaments are multiple days. So I was missing a lot of classes. And then on top of that, for some crazy reason, I decided to be vice president for NSBE and also be a teacher's assistant for a programming class. So I was just doing a lot. And I tell everyone that was like one of my hardest semesters and probably like the most challenging things I've ever been through. But I don't regret any of it because I feel like now, like since I was able to overcome that semester and get through that semester, I can now face like any challenge that's given to me. Like, give me whatever workload you want to give me. I can handle it now at that point. So sometimes the challenges you face, like at the end of it, they can be really worth it because you learn a lot from it and you can learn to apply that for your next challenge that you're going to be faced with.
Beth, anything to add? Thank you, Lavonca.
I think that was a great answer, Lavonca. For me, the biggest challenge actually wasn't college. It was my first job right when I finished college. And I took a job with the company I currently work for, UOP. And what they hire undergraduate engineers to do is so-called go on the road. And so my job was to travel around to refineries and petrochemical plants all around the world for construction and startup and troubleshooting of new chemical plants and refineries. And the reason why the job was challenging is because they asked us to travel 100% of the time. And we didn't have a whole lot of say in where we were going or for how long and what we would be doing. And so, you know, I spent about 3 years in this job, and I spent a year in China, a bunch of time in Turkey and Brazil, all over the world. And having a job where you're working in foreign countries, particularly being a young female engineer in countries where they don't necessarily view young females as engineers, was challenging. And I feel like the job was a bit lonely sometimes, just because you're off in corners of the world where you don't speak the language. But similarly to what Lavonca says, I definitely don't regret it. I mean, that was an experience that was challenging, but it set me up really well for a career in chemical engineering. I got to see the world. I got to learn how to work with people from all different backgrounds. I got to see lots of chemical plants actually operating and climb around in the equipment. So it was a great experience, but it was challenging. But sometimes, you know, the challenges are the most important things.
Yep.
Thank you, Beth. Martin, anything to add?
Yeah,
biggest challenge?
If I could just add something really quickly, what I think hopefully sums it up really is, you know, you can be your own worst enemy, right? And how you approach your situation really determines whether a challenge is going to be enjoyable or a complete bummer, right? So just remember, you're responsible for your own experience of life. You know, choose to like what you do. You can always change it up later if you like something better, but don't let challenges get in your way, right? A challenge should be seen as a growth opportunity.
I love the way you said that. It's just because it's hard does not mean you can't do it.
That's right.
But one thing I heard from everybody is that is a part of college and work is having that balance between life and work, or school and life. We all have to challenge that. Lavonca kind of really hit it on the head when she said she was doing all these organizations, TAing, and trying to do a course load. Chemical engineering, you do like 18 credit hours most of your years in school, or engineering in general. So that's a big balance. Beth, you have anything to add about that life, work, life, school balance?
Yeah, so I think it's something important that you need to figure out what works for you. For me personally, I don't necessarily draw a line between my work and my life because I love what I'm doing as a career. And if I didn't love it, I would change up what I was doing. So my partner is also a chemical engineer. She actually also works for UOP. And so, you know, for me, the line is actually a little bit blurred. But I think it's really important to like what you're doing in school or like what you're doing for your job. But it's also really important to have hobbies and interests that are outside of your day job. So my 2 cents.
Martin, you?
Yeah,
that's comment about life and balancing?
That's exactly right. It's not work-life balance. It's love balanced with not love so much, right? And there are going to be things in your work that you love and things that you don't enjoy so much, just like there are things in your home life that, you know, part of it you love, and there are things that you just kind of have to do, like tax season is coming up, right? So that's really what it's about.
Okay. Thank you, Shanita, for that's a good question. Hope that helped you. I don't see any more questions. We still got 33 more minutes. Bring more questions. If not, I got to think of some more because you guys already went through like my basic questions.
I'll say one thing real quick on the like additional on the work-life balance. I know Martin said it, but like it's very important. Like they said, love what you do. But if you don't love what you do, then maybe it's just time to switch it up. Maybe it's time to make that change. And I think something that really stressed me going into big decisions, like for example, picking my school or picking my first job and like deciding which offer I wanted to take is like, I had this mindset that, oh my gosh, this is such an important decision. Oh my gosh, what if I make the wrong decision? But then eventually I realized that a lot of decisions you make can be temporary. If you are not happy where you're at, you can change it up. Like nothing really has to be permanent. Like let's say I started this job and then I realized that maybe this isn't the career for me. Then I can go find another job. You know, like I feel like it's just important to not put so much stress on every decision you make because it's okay to make the wrong choice sometimes. And maybe it's not the wrong choice. It's just, it taught you a different lesson. But you can always change. Like things that I like to think things in life can be temporary if you want them to be. So don't be too stressed about every little decision.
Yeah, I love all of that. Kind of my philosophy of life too is your life. You get to choose it. You get to pick it how you want to. And like Martin said, with the internet nowadays, everything's out there. And anything you want to know about, just Google search it, Yahoo search it, if they still do Yahoo search. And you'll find something related to it and ask questions. Events like this are a great place to ask questions. And enjoy it. Enjoy your life. You only get one.
Yeah, somebody once explained it to me as, you know, if you're at a crossroads, think of it as like two roads. You got blueberries down one road, strawberries down the other road. Either way, you're going to have a good experience. So pick it and don't look back. It'll be different, but it'll be totally worth it.
Yeah, I agree. So for me, a little bit about me, this is my third industry I worked in. I started in metals, I worked in water, and now I work in food. So I'm for somebody who's like, all right, I'm bored. I want to do something different, and I move on. So don't feel afraid. I know back in the day it was all about, work somewhere 35 years and retire. Now we're more accustomed to work somewhere, 2 years and move on if you want to. It's up to you. Enjoy your life. Let's see. Any other questions?
So I have a question for Jaylen and a question for Lavonca. Is that allowed? Am I allowed to ask questions?
Yeah, go ahead.
So my question for Jaylen, so what's it like working in a food plant? Like what kind of food does your plant make and what does your job look like day to day? Do you get to eat the food? I guess is my main question, but also more generally, what do you do?
Yes, so we do get to eat the food. We have tastings every day. So I work for, my facility is a meat facility. We do meats and vegetables. So most time when we do food for like restaurants and for like industrial, so usually like you go to a frozen food aisle, you'll find our product processed inside that frozen food. So it's a lot about adding the right amount of injection or solution to the product. So to add weight, because of course we sell everything by the pound. You want to add the weight for the customer. You want to give it life. And so that's what we focus on. So a food plant it's a very interesting, it's different. Coming from a water plant to a food plant, a lot more labor, a lot more people on the floor. And it's more like a manual 1970 kind of plant feel that's trying to move on to the next stage. So it is different. And yes, we get to eat the food every day. So we're in cooked food. We eat it every day. It is different food based on our customer, based on the flow, but every day. Some people gain weight. I don't, because now I'm like, I don't like eating chicken anymore. So things like that.
That's pretty awesome.
Lavonca, what about you?
Yeah, so at a refinery, basically imagine a huge heap of metal. Because that's basically what it is. It's like a pipe heaven as well. Like it's just pipelines everywhere, like pipe networks, pipe everything. And then you have these huge vessels or like tanks that are storing liquid. But as a process engineer, or chemical engineer, what your typical focus is day-to-day operations. So how do I make sure that, one, we're producing the products the way they need to be produced? So I kind of talked about earlier, I worked in hydrotreating. So a big part of hydrotreating is removing sulfur because the government has regulations on how much sulfur can be in your fuel. So are we removing the right amount of sulfur? Are we meeting the sulfur targets? And then also, how can we optimize this and do it better or kind of cheaper? Like, how do we do it with less energy, less fuel, less resources? And so that's things as like, you're looking at the process as a whole. So you're changing things like pressure. I'm gonna change pressure over here. I'm gonna change temperature over here. I'm gonna change flow rate, things like that. Just every day, constantly. The refinery runs 24/7. It never stops. So sometimes as an engineer, you might get a call in the middle of the night. That's always fun. Or you might get a call on the weekend. But that's kind of the exciting part, because it's like, when something changes, well, you don't want bad things to happen, of course. But if something does drastically change, and it's like, okay, problem solving right now, let's go. What can I crank out to get us back on track to where we need to be? But yeah, that's what it's like being at the refinery. Very fast paced. It's it's not really ever a slow day. If it is, we have this thing where you can't say the quiet word. You can't say the units are running quietly, because then people are superstitious and think something's gonna happen.
You want to know, that's the crazy part. So I'm operations manager, and it's the same thing. If I say, oh yeah, line 4, line 3, they're running perfect. As soon as I say the words, the next day they're down for 5 hours.
Yep.
So it's just, so we don't say things are running great. We just, let them run great. But
Exactly.
similar. So in my role, the process engineers, they don't necessarily report to me. It's like a dotted line report. My main job is to get the product out the door while maintaining, like you said, what the customer wants. I don't determine the specs. I just have to align the products to produce that spec. I will work with the process engineers to like, okay, we're not making the amount of money that we should be making on this product on this line. Is there something that we could do differently? So engineers are all about, you give us the constraints and we'll figure it out for you. So my job as a manager is not let's do technical anymore, but to identify our gaps, get the teams together, and make sure we move on to close those gaps. So it is a little different. I'm day to day. So operation managers, we put out fires every day in the plant. This plant runs 24/7 with different kind of shifts. So we just put out fires. If there's something going on, okay, can we do this? Can we do this?
Not literally, right? Not literally. We do have those in refining.
Yeah, unfortunately, we try not to. We don't want those.
That's
ever.
Right.
No, your fires are different. Yeah, no. So that's one thing. I chose manufacturing and operations just because I love that thrill of every day's a new day. Every day is always, yesterday doesn't always predict tomorrow. And I like that about life. It's changing every day. And I'm a people person. I love people. When I was engineering and I got bored of like sitting in the cubicle and looking at draft designs. It was killing me. So that was me. That's why I kind of went to the operation side of things, and like, I can run your rates and I can figure it out using the teams and support. I like that question, Beth. Thanks.
Yep.
We did get one from Don. He says, how do you deal with difficult bosses? I never had one. Martin, any insight on that? How would you deal with a difficult boss?
Yeah, I guess the way you deal with anybody who's difficult is to figure out what they want and try to give it to them. I think in general, I guess depends what you mean by difficult. There is sort of an art to managing up. And I was having a little discussion kind of about this with somebody who works for me on my team, who was presenting to my boss and some of her peers. And he came out of there saying, I pitched this idea to him and it was anticlimactic. And I was like, well, what do you expect, right? It's like they liked it and they said to go on. And he said, yeah, but we've been talking about this for like 3 times and we hardly see the move the ball, and all of a sudden they're giving me a free pass to do what I want, right? And I was telling them, it's a lot of working with your boss is getting them used to your ideas right? So sometimes you have to spoon feed it to them. And eventually, if they think they came up with your idea, then that's just as good as you getting the credit, right? Because it gives you the liberty, the freedom to do what you want to do. And the best thing you can do, if you're lucky enough in your career, is to have a control of your own destiny as much as possible and be able to innovate, be able, you want to be able to design your job, because it might not be the job you love, but it's got a better chance than somebody else giving you a job. So in general, I find that the way you manage around your boss and your leadership is to try and come to an understanding and understand what they want. And if you both win, then that's better for everybody. That's better for the company as well.
Beth, any insight?
Yeah, so I think if you perceive that you have a difficult boss, your boss probably perceives that you're a difficult employee. And I think that that can be solved by better communication. I think it can almost always be solved by better communication, that there's some difference between what your expectations are and what your boss's expectations are. So for me, I think the most important thing is having an open line of communication with my boss. We change jobs a lot at my company. So I change jobs, or my bosses change jobs. So I feel like it's, maybe even once a year that I have a new boss. And it always starts with, let's get to know each other. How do you work? How do I work? How should I communicate with you? Do you want an email? Do you want me to stop by your office? And I feel like, very early establishing with your boss, how does he or she want you to communicate with them? And what are their expectations and what are yours, and getting aligned on that is a really important first step every time you start a new job.
It's good advice.
Good advice. Lavonca, anything to add? Have you had any difficult bosses yet?
I have not, thankfully, but also I'm very brand new still. So thank you, Martin and Beth, for your great answers.
I think I said it, like the most important class for me was like English and communications, because from being someone who only reported to people, now having people report to me, it's all about communication, and you have to be able to communicate what your boss wants and what you want from your boss, because it's not necessarily that in my philosophy, is about servant leadership. It's not about that you need to necessarily please your boss, but your boss has the obligation to please you. So it's a two-way street. So it start with communication, work with each other. You guys are a team. So I think when you start your first job, or even in college, professors are seen like to be the boss, but your professors want the best for you and you pay them. So you can make sure you get your money's worth and make sure you communicate everything you want from them. Same with your boss. Like, your boss is asking you to do stuff, they're paying you, but your work is paying the company, which helps your boss get paid as well. So it's the same thing. Like, it's a two-way street. They have an obligation to help you out. You have an obligation to help them out.
Yep.
Let's see, is there any more questions? Thank you, Don. My most difficult professor, well, my most difficult boss was Don Chmielewski. I was his TA. Yeah. All righty.
I have a question for Ivanka. What was it like to graduate from college and start working during COVID?
So much fun.
Yeah,
I'm just very grateful that I only had to do half of a semester in COVID, because I don't know how people do this virtual learning thing. That definitely was a challenge for me. I'm also grateful that I did have a past internship with the company, with BP, before now. So I did know some people before, and I've been introduced to the refinery beforehand, so I did know a little bit about it. But yeah, you just got to get used to the virtual learning thing. Or virtual everything. You just got to accept that's the kind of new way of life and go with it. Take the bull by its horns always,
Yeah.
That's actually a good question. What about Beth? How is virtual working for you?
It actually works reasonably well for me. I'm in a job now where I don't need to be at site. And so myself and the people that work for me are getting really used to being virtual. We spend, all day on Microsoft Teams meetings, collaborating. I'm sort of in a sales role now where I'm talking with customers all the time. And typically that type of job, I would be traveling to go see customers. now I do it virtually. So lots of things are possible virtually, but I'm definitely looking forward to the time when we can all see each other face to face. Hopefully not too long.
Okay, we're getting a lot of people that say they agree. Oh, college is not easy during COVID. Yeah,
Sure.
I agree with that. I only took one online class when I was in college, and I dropped out and went to the in-person class because it was boring. I can't sit and watch things on computers. Marty, what about you? How's the virtual COVID? How did it impact your work life?
I'm on a digital team, and I work with lots of folks overseas. So like Beth, I'm not too much impacted. But I do have 2 kids in high school, right? And one of them is a junior and trying to make his decision. And they're doing remote learning, and we're on different schedules. So, I have a meeting. Yesterday I had a meeting at 5:30 in the morning, right? Because it's afternoon to the folks over in the UK, right? Super early for me. And then my kids go to bed late because they're doing a Acellus. I don't know how many of you guys can relate to this, listening, but they're doing a Acellus so they can start whatever they want. And my son will, I'm going to out him a little. Hope he's not listening, but he gets up at like noon or something, and it's like we're completely off sync. So the difficulty for me has been mostly about trying to sync up with the rest of my family and kind of see them once in a while, right? Spend some time with them.
Yeah. And for me personally, for myself, I'm operations, so I keep the plant running. I never had the virtual. For me, I don't like the virtual work from home thing because it just means more meetings that are, it used to be like 5-minute conversations in the office have now became, oh, let's have a 30-minute meeting. And I'm like, no, let's not. The plant is still running. I don't have 30 minutes for you guys.
Yeah.
So it's that balance now of the people who are still here and then the ones that are at home and trying to keep the communication good.
And one of the things to probably point out is in chemie, probably in a lot of professions, you have your mix of things that are prompt, right? Like you're talking about ops. When you do ops support, you do get the immediate gratification, and you're in the moment. You're able to solve that problem. If nobody else can, or if they look to you and please tell us what to do and it works, you feel fantastic, right? You also have some things that are going to be long term. Like I was in a project that took like over 8 years from when we started to when actually things started up, right? It cost like $10 billion. So it's like you have to have that patience to deal with both types. You're going to have the gratification of doing things quick, but there are also times when things are just going to seem like they're going to drag on, or where you got to have so many phone calls and you have so many upsets, and it doesn't feel like you're making progress. So I imagine all jobs are like that. I usually like to have a mix, to have some things that I'm doing that are with a quick deadline, and then some longer term projects. But people fall on different spectrums, and the only way to really understand what you like is to go out and try and experience it and enjoy as much about chemical engineering as you can, because it is a diverse field. There's so many things you can get into. Sometimes you'll get pulled along into something and you'll say, well, that sounds interesting, let me try it, right? So go with your instinct. It's not necessarily, I think maybe Beth pointed out, it's not necessarily the deliberate plan that you make, but it's about sort of broadening your skills and just gaining the experiences and saying, okay, I like this, I don't like that.
Yeah. So I think I was using the time counter that said 15 minutes left, but we ended at 2:40, which is 5 minutes ago, as I'm seeing now.
So Jaylen, thank you for moderating, and thank you to our panelists so much. We learned so much from you all today, so we really appreciate you spending some time with us, telling us a little bit about some of the stories that you've experienced and giving us some advice as we think about careers in engineering. So thank you, everyone.